The term dynamic refers to the range of sound between the quietest and loudest volume. The dynamic range of an audio passage is the ratio of the loudest signal to the quietest signal. Acoustic instruments can produce a dynamic range that is so great that it can cause problems in the recording process. Gates and expanders, the opposite of compression, make soft sounds below the threshold softer. A noise gate, or gate in its most simple form, allows a signal to pass through only when it is above a set threshold. In a hardware or software plug-in, gates are controlled by the threshold and it's measured in dB. Expander, setting the ratio, increases the dynamic range by making soft sounds softer. Other parameters that assist in fine-tuning the gate are the attack, hold, and the release. On the hardware or plug-in, it would look something like this. When a drum kit is closed mic, using individual microphones for each instrument, every channel is often gated to improve instrument separation, since instruments leak into adjacent microphones. For instance, for the bass drum not to open the snare drum's gate, we will EQ the low frequencies out on the snare drum's noise gate.
Hi, let's talk about compression. Compression is a process that allows you to restrict the dynamic range of a sound recording. It's basically something that lets you control the difference between the loudest and softest sounds. A compressor is a processor whose output level rises slower than the input level increases. There are a lot of different controls inside of a compressor that would be cool to talk about, but let's focus on the two crucial ones, threshold and ratio. The threshold control in a compressor basically acts as a switch. It's something that determines when the processor will compress. The ratio control is something that sets the amount of compression. The ratio control determines how much compression we're going to do when the threshold is crossed. So let's take a look at this. If you think of this line here as the input level increasing and each of these lines as 1 dB, if we were to go and compress something at, let's say, 2 to 1, what it would mean is that whenever the input signal hits the threshold and the compressor compresses, for every 2 dB that the input level rises, the compressor would only let 1 dB through. If we compressed it 4 to 1, it would mean that for every 4 dB of input gain the compressor gets over the threshold, it will only let 1 through. And if we want to know what limiting is, what that means is that no matter how high the input signal gets, the output stays at one set level. That's limiting. Now let's take a look at how this works on a real file. Here's a snare drum sound. You can see here it's very soft and here it's very loud. This is a compressor. This is the threshold control right here. The threshold is set so high that the compressor's not kicking in. But as I turn the threshold down, you can begin to see the red indicator here is showing our gain reduction, how much the compressor is turning the sound down based on this control right here. And then you have makeup gain to bring your volume back. That's squashed, and that's compression.
Let's talk about high-pass and low-pass filters. The idea behind these filters is pretty straightforward. A high-pass filter allows frequencies that are higher than the cutoff frequency to pass through. A low-pass filter does the opposite. It allows frequencies that are lower than the cutoff to pass through. As you can see from the diagram, the frequencies beyond the cutoff frequency are attenuated at a slope. They are not instantly reduced to zero. Let's look at a few basic examples of filters in action. If we listen to this track without any filters, it sounds like this. Notice the annoying hum. It's really distracting. Let's get rid of it. The hum that we are working with has a high frequency, so we want everything with a frequency below it to be heard. Therefore, we'll need to use a low-pass filter. If we look at these buttons here, we see 3 choices for state variable filters. Let's choose LP for low pass, and let's see what happens. Already it sounds a little better, but that hum is still there. Over here is the cutoff knob, which determines the cutoff frequency for the filter. Since we have this set as a low-pass filter, everything above the cutoff will be attenuated, or the volume will be significantly decreased. Many filters label the cutoff frequency using hertz or kilohertz, but as you can see, this particular one represents it with percentages. The lower we make the cutoff, the more of the high frequencies will be attenuated. Since the hum is still there, let's lower the cutoff frequency. Let's give it another listen and see what happens. We have a bit of distortion occurring. Let's remove the effect of the filter on the sound envelope, or shape of the waveform, by moving the cutoff mod slider to 0. Let's see if that helps. There you go. No more hum, no more distortion.
Hi, I'm Mick Kiley, picking up the discussion of filters. We'll switch to something a little more familiar to show the high-pass filter. Here's a brief sample of the unfiltered sound, this time in Ableton Live. Applying a high-pass filter is essentially the same as applying a low-pass cutoff, and it would sound something like this. One of the best applications of the high-pass filters is in applying them during the final mixdown to your instruments and voices that don't contain much low-frequency information to begin with. This makes your drums and bass lines sound clear and unmuddied in the final mixdown, and it doesn't use as much in the way of computer resources. Two more important filters worth mentioning are the band-pass filter and the band-reject filter. A band-pass filter, as the name implies, passes frequencies between its cutoff frequencies and attenuates those frequencies outside the range. It sounds like this. The band reject filter attenuates frequencies between its cutoff frequencies and passes those outside the reject range. Here's what it sounds like. And that's our presentation on the 4 most important filters. We hope you got something out of it.